What is your weird and unexplained story of visiting a creepy or an unsettling location? I remember those nights driving home through the rural woods near my mom's house. One evening, after hanging out with friends, I passed the old elementary school when something bizarre happened. Out of nowhere, this massive orb, like a beach ball made of thick fog, floated right in front of my car. I slammed on the brakes, completely sober, trying to make sense of it. It hovered about 8 feet in the air, bobbing gently before vanishing into the trees. The next morning, I shared this strange encounter with my mom. Her eyes widened as she told me she had seen something too. At that same spot, a man, dressed in clothes that looked like they were from 100 years ago, would walk behind her car and disappear in her mirrors. It sent chills down my spine. What was happening in those woods? Were we witnessing something otherworldly, or was it just our imaginations running wild? Either way, it left me questioning what else might be lurking in the shadows. When I was a teenager, my friends and I decided to break into this abandoned petrol station that had been out of service for ages. It was all boarded up and looked super creepy. We thought it would be a fun adventure, but what we found inside was mind-blowing. The place was like a time capsule. Everything was still there. The empty till, the old tannoy system, and even boxes of food on the shelves. It felt like it had just been abandoned in a hurry. Then, I heard this strange hum coming from the corner. I crept over and discovered the ice cream chiller, still plugged in and running, with ice building around it. I managed to pry it open, and, to my shock, there were still ice creams inside. I grabbed a Solero, but it tasted weird and watery. It was such a bizarre experience, and honestly, I wouldn't have dared to go there alone. We all agreed it was one of the freakiest nights of our lives. A 45-minute drive west of Gainesville takes you to the haunting remnants of Rosewood, a town erased from existence in a brutal 1923 race riot. I stumbled upon it one Sunday, just 10 minutes from the sleepy charm of Cedar Key, with its quaint shops and cafes. But Rosewood tells a darker story. It was not just a riot. It was a systematic destruction, a pogrom that forced its black residents to flee, never to return. The details are chilling, intertwining with the legacies of those who lived nearby, their descendants still present today. And while Rosewood's tragedy is profound, it's just one of many dark chapters in Florida's history during that decade. The echoes of the past linger, reminding us of the deep scars left behind. I grew up in a semi-rural town in the UK, and there was this wooded area we loved to hang out in. It was right off a train track, a perfect hideaway for us teens to drink and smoke. There was this old shack there, a bizarre mix of a house and a shed. It was tiny, just one room, with drywall walls and a flat roof. The door was gone, and the windows were shattered, but it felt like our secret spot. One rainy day, my friends and I decided to smoke there. But when we got to the entrance, we found a board blocking the way. We pushed it aside, but as soon as we stepped inside, I got this awful feeling, like we were being watched. It was so intense, I convinced my friends to leave. The next time we went back, that board was up again, and this time we couldn't move it. It was like something didn't want us there. I've never gone back since. Something about that place just felt wrong, and I trust my gut. When I was a teenager, my parents and I visited this sleepy little town in South Africa, right by the ocean. It was the off-season, so everything was eerily quiet, just the wind and waves crashing in the distance. We were starving and stumbled upon a restaurant that looked like a regular house. It was closed, but the owner opened up just for us. Walking in felt like stepping into a witch's lair. The dining room was filled with mismatched furniture, and the walls were lined with dried herbs and odd trinkets. It was freezing inside, colder than outside. The owner would disappear into the kitchen, only to return with cryptic messages from the chef, but you could only hear her voice. We tried to order, but she insisted she knew what we needed. We ended up with chicken schnitzels and some stew. It was good, but she just stood there, watching us eat, which was unsettling. Then, another couple arrived with their young daughter. The owner invited her to play with her pet rabbits upstairs. The girl was thrilled, but she never came back down, leaving her meal untouched. The whole town had this strange vibe, and I wouldn't be surprised if it vanished one day. To top it off, we took some strong Dramamine for a canceled whale watching tour and felt like we were floating until it wore off. It was an unforgettable experience, to say the least. Shortly after I graduated high school, I found myself at a friend's house way out in the Oklahoma countryside. It was late, everyone else had passed out, so I decided to take a walk in the woods. As I wandered, I heard music drifting through the trees. Curious, I followed it to a small clearing where I stumbled upon this random guy, just sitting on a log, playing a flute. It was surreal. There were no houses nearby, and the silence of the woods made any car noise impossible to miss. I sat down, captivated by his soft, melodic tunes. But then nature called, and when I stepped away to relieve myself, the music stopped. When I turned back, he was gone, just vanished without a trace. I searched for signs, but there was nothing. The next morning, I told my friends, and they thought I was nuts. From then on, every time I visited, I brought my clarinet, hoping to lure him back. I played in that clearing, but he never returned. It's a mystery that still lingers in my mind. I remember this one morning when my roommate and I took the bus to work, catching the 5:30 a.m. ride. I was deeply engrossed in a book, completely oblivious, while my friend dozed off next to me. We missed our transfer stop, and I only realized it when we approached the next one. I shook him awake, urging him to get off with me so we could sprint back to catch our bus. As soon as we stepped off, I felt this odd vibe. Right in front of us, a massive cockroach crawled up the wall of a building. The street lamps cast this warm, yellow-orange glow, a stark contrast to the sterile white light I was used to. We found ourselves in what I can only describe as the industrial district, surrounded by warehouses and factories. Workers lingered in the shadows, waiting for their shifts to start, giving the place an eerie feel. My friend was annoyed, but we both knew we were in this together. We rushed to find our bus, even splitting up for a moment, convinced we knew the way. It was strange, almost like there was an invisible line between the industrial district and the bus stop area. That morning stuck with me, a surreal reminder of how quickly things can shift in the city. I was driving around with my cousin in Virginia, just looking to kill some time. We decided to take a random turn down a street that caught my eye, thinking we'd find some chill suburbs to explore. Instead, we ended up on these narrow dirt roads, surrounded by trees that felt like they were reaching for us. After about 15 minutes of winding deeper into the woods, the novelty wore off and panic set in. We couldn't see the way back, and it felt like we were lost in some kind of maze. Then, we hit an intersection and spotted a billboard with writing in a language I couldn't recognize. Not English, Japanese, or Arabic. Maybe Thai? It was surreal, like we'd crossed into another dimension. Just when we were starting to freak out, we finally saw a Burger King in the distance. We both let out a huge sigh of relief. Sometimes, the strangest adventures lead you right back to familiar ground. The summer of 1999, my dad and I embarked on a cross-country road trip from Los Angeles to Atlanta. The first half was a disaster. Our truck broke down in Phoenix and overheated in El Paso. We decided to visit the Alamo, but first, we needed a place to crash. We stopped in Ozona, Texas, and that's where the real nightmare began. At 1 a.m., we walked into a Chevron that doubled as a Taco Bell, only to be met by a room full of middle-aged men staring at us in eerie silence. We grabbed some tacos and fled to find a hotel. My dad picked one with a pool, hoping for a late-night swim. But the office had cereal dispensers overflowing with roaches, and the pool was a green, slimy mess filled with giant frogs. We decided to just go to bed, but when we got to our room, the door was wide open. A 300-pound man lay on the bed in his tidy white ease. I screamed like Kevin from Home Alone. The manager moved us to the old wing, which smelled like mold. The bathroom was a horror show, covered in green and black fuzz. A postcard from 1963 showed the hotel looking brand new, and I felt like I'd been sucked into the Twilight Zone. I cried until my dad agreed to sleep in the truck. At dawn, we burned rubber out of that town, and I still warn people 23 years later. Don't stop in Ozona unless you want to be abducted by body snatchers. In 2016, my partner and I traveled from Raleigh to Charleston to catch the solar eclipse. We were warned about traffic, but the drive there was smooth. Little did we know, the journey home would be a nightmare. By 10 p.m., we were stuck in nearly standstill traffic, with no access to Waze or maps. My flip phone was useless, and has only worked on Wi-Fi. We resorted to an old GPS, leading us through dark back roads, eerie cornfields, and ghostly southern towns. Around 2 a.m., I was fighting drowsiness and insisted we find a place to rest. Then, we stumbled upon a motel, set back in the trees, with a retro Americana vibe. The sign read Pine Cone Motel. I was thrilled, but my partner was adamantly against stopping. After some bickering, we drove away, opting for a rest area instead. Since then, I've searched for that motel, hoping to find it again for my photography. I finally found a Pine Cone Motel in Marston, but it wasn't the same. The building, the sign, even the trees were different. The mystery of that night still haunts me, and I can't shake the feeling that the motel has vanished into thin air. Years ago, I was in the car with my mom, sister, and a few friends, racing to a cave attraction. We were late, so we took a shortcut down a dirt road we'd never tried before. It felt wrong the moment we turned on it. The road was narrow, surrounded by dense forest, and then we spotted an old truck half hidden in the weeds. It was beat up, covered in vines, and just eerie. We were all silent, tension thick in the air. Then we saw a sign nailed to a tree, hand-painted with a chilling message, "Get out." It was riddled with bullet holes, like a warning. My heart raced. Right after that, we passed a glove nailed to another tree, with the state police logo on it. That was it. My mom told us to duck down, panic in her voice, convinced we were in danger. We sped out of there, and to this day, we still talk about it, but we've never gone back. Some places are better left unexplored. My cousin and I were just two 16-year-olds looking for an adventure in the shining cliff woods of Ambergate, Derbyshire. We set off for the abandoned wire factory, a relic from the war, hidden deep in the woods. As we wandered past crumbling buildings, my cousin couldn't resist tagging one of the already graffiti-covered walls. But then, we rounded the corner of a warehouse and stumbled upon something bizarre. There were about a dozen people dressed in white, almost like hospital gowns, chatting away, while one stood out in a striking red gown. It felt like we'd walked into a scene from a strange movie. We didn't stick around to find out what was going on. We turned on our heels and bolted, but not before I noticed they'd seen us. No chase, just an eerie feeling that lingered as we made our way back. It was odd, unsettling, and honestly, a little terrifying. Just a normal day turned into an unforgettable encounter in the woods. In my childhood home, there was this old caboose in the park that was like a treasure chest for kids. We'd climb all over it, imagining grand adventures. One day, I discovered the door actually opened. Inside, I found cracked pressure gauges, an old lantern lens, and faded charts. It felt like stepping into a time capsule. But then, I opened a door and found a closet filled with racks of clothes. I was reading Narnia at the time, and it freaked me out. I slammed the door shut, convinced I had stumbled upon an interdimensional portal. A few days later, the caboose was sealed up tight, windows boarded. Years later, I learned a squatter almost set it on fire, leading to its closure. But for the longest time, I believed the adults were hiding something magical. It's wild how a simple childhood memory can twist into a tale of mystery and adventure. I found myself driving through a stretch of highway that felt like it was stuck in time. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over a diner that looked like it hadn't served a meal in decades. The neon sign flickered, but the parking lot was empty, save for an old pickup truck that seemed to have been abandoned mid-journey. I stepped inside, the door creaking ominously. The air was thick with dust and the smell of stale coffee. As I sat at the counter, I noticed a faded menu, the prices frozen in the past. Suddenly, the bell above the door jingled, and a woman appeared, her eyes wide and unblinking. She didn't say a word, just slid a cup of coffee in front of me. I took a sip, and it tasted like memories, bitter and sweet. When I looked up, she was gone, vanished into thin air. I rushed outside, but the diner was now just a shell, the walls crumbling, as if it had never existed. I drove away, heart racing, wondering if I had crossed into a realm where time and reality blurred. That diner was a ghost, a reminder of places that shouldn't exist, yet somehow do.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.